All right, let's pause for a moment, take a big breath, and we'll recap what we've covered so far. We started off by explaining how upper management is disconnected from our customer-aligned team. Beyond Budgeting shared the reason for this disconnect are false management assumptions. The first is that the future is predictable and plannable. This means they believe their annual budgets will actually remain accurate for 3, 6, 9 months or more. The second is that people can't be trusted. What this leads to is management wanting to make all of the decisions. Now, Bjarte Bogsnes countered this with his wonderful analogy of traffic lights versus roundabouts. Traffic lights, where traffic planners are making remote decisions using historical data and typically using average traffic flow. This reminds us of the person who drowned in the river that was 3 feet deep on average. This is versus roundabouts that are safer and more effective. They use distributed decision making using a positive value set based on trust and transparency. But our upper management are not deterred. They say, no, we must act like a startup. And so they take their traditional cost budgets and they mash that with change initiatives. We don't get agile, we don't get flexible, we end up with an unsustainable mess. We need to make a systemic change. Now, we've selected a few of the many frameworks that go together to help direct us in our systemic changes. They are Stratum Theory, Bible System Model, Leadership's Vertical Development, and Beyond Budgeting. We're going to start by explaining in more detail Stratum Theory and Bible System Model. Let's get started. Stratum is the term that Elliott Jacques used to describe the layers or the requisite layers that are necessary inside an organisation. And what he says is as you go up these stratum layers, the complexity of decision making gets harder and harder. This is because the time frame horizon that the layers operate across gets longer and longer. Consequently, the people at those layers need to have greater vertical development in order to handle that complexity. Sound familiar? At the top we have stratums 5 and 6. They're operating at 5 to 10, 10 to 20 years. Their role is to ensure that the organisation remains viable and prosperous. Think of Nokia. Nokia made the major decision to move from paper mills to telecommunications. They did miss the move from mobile phones to smartphones, but that's probably they were listening too much to their direct customers, the telcos, instead of the end users. Stratums 3 and 4, they're working on making their part of the organisation as effective as possible. They're wanting to create an environment for the lower levels to be able to maximise their potential. Stratum 1 and 2, they are working in the here and now, and they are building out the customer value through selling, implementing, supporting the offerings of the organisation. We now have our layers in our organisation. One thing that happens, however, is that often organisations' layers collapse. Their time frames collapse. Sometimes it's due to quarterly results driven by Wall Street. Sometimes it's due by having people at the wrong vertical development level leading the company. What happens when they do collapse is the first thing is that they become in danger of being disrupted or becoming irrelevant because no one's looking out far enough into the future. The second is because they've all collapsed down, managers want to help. They want to start making all the decisions. They want to go to customer meetings. Our quarterly forecast meetings suddenly become daily meetings. I think we've all been there. We now have our layers of our organisation. What we can now do is look at the viable systems model, the 6 systems, and how they fit within the stratums. So Stafford Beer put together these 6 systems, which we need to take note of. They exist, whether we think of it or not. Whether they are official systems or processes, or whether they are ad hoc ones born out of necessity. The first one is governance, system 5. This starts with the organisation's identity and purpose. In chapter 1 we used Disney, who at the high level, stratum 5 and 6 level, their purpose was to entertain, inform, inspire people around the globe through the power of unparalleled storytelling. Think of how this flows down to stratums 1 and 2, where at Disney World's theme parks, they have this cascading purpose where their purpose is happiest place on earth. The next system is adapting, system 4. It's described as there and then, looking out into the future of the time span of each stratum. An example here is Blockbuster Video. Blockbuster actually saw the challenge coming from Netflix, but they were probably operating at stratum 3, maybe stratum 4. So what they try to do is create a hybrid from their base of retail stores. They launched Blockbuster online and you could sign up in store. The rest is history, and their hybrid model failed. Compare this to Charles Schwab and Company. Charles Schwab had a similar problem in their industry with online trading. They made the bigger decision to launch eSchwab. eSchwab could target the total market, including competing with Charles Schwab itself. And with them, they remained successful. From adapting, we go to organising, system 3. Organising is described as here and now. It complements adapting, system 4. So what it's doing is looking at things like the frontline management down at stratum 1 and 2. It's looking at how do we manage performance? How do we have the right resources, have the right capabilities? How do we make sure we're all working together in a synergistic way? Next is monitoring, system 3 star. Its role is actually to help organising system 3. It is wanting to identify and help manage emerging issues before they become larger problems. It's kind of like what lean thinking calls going to Gemba, where Gemba is the Japanese word for truth or real place. Done correctly, that is with the purpose of helping the organisation, monitoring builds trust. Does monitoring in your organisation build trust, or does it destroy it? Next we have coordinating, system 2. This keeps everything working together, everything flowing through the organisation across the different departments. It could use tools and processes or just people talking to each other. Now, coordinating is a great example of what we talked about before. This system exists whether it's official or ad hoc. If there is no official coordination system, the way it works is we just ring up our friend in the other department and say, hey, here's what we need, can we work together? Finally, we have the system 1, value creating. This is where the productive work gets done. This is where it's on the shop floor, in the retail stores, building out the e-commerce websites. For higher stratums, what this could be is instead of upper management wanting to show off on the Zoom call they have all the business books behind them. Or maybe they could just read them. Or, now we're not biased, but to save time, they could watch the Unlocking Change bookcast. Okay. We've had our frameworks. We now have all the systems that sit within the different stratum levels. It's now time to put our frameworks together. And we'll start with the organisational layer structure, the stratums from Elliott Jacques' Stratum Theory. And then we're going to add to that the systems from Stafford Beer's Viable System Model. Now, these systems are in a recursive structure. What we mean by that is the bottom level systems are actually contained in the level above them. And they're contained in the level above them and so forth. What this does is our self-contained customer-aligned team at the bottom level is when it gets contained this way, we don't lose that structure, we don't lose that focus as we go up into upper management. Next, we need to add the leadership's vertical development. Now, you may have noticed that we have drawn our people icons, each with an increasing number of sides as they vertically develop. This represents the increasing number of perspectives that they're able to contemplate. The circle shape at the alchemist level is a nerdy nod to Edwin Abbott's book, Flatland. Now, by expanding the recursive groupings, we can see how the frameworks align and come together. We've actually moved our expert down a layer to join the frontline team because experts do not make great leaders, mainly because they keep telling people how to do their job. If you are an expert in watching this, you actually might be writing down a list of things that we have missed. Okay, so we now have our building blocks in place. But how does this relate to a real-life organisational structure? Well, to help us here, we can overlay the upper management versus customer-aligned team structure that we had before. Here we show the hierarchical structure of our functional silos. This structure directs our upper management to operate top-down with an internal focus. However, our recursive structure, starting with the customer-aligned self-contained team and built with multiple inclusive recursive layers, naturally directs our upper management to operate aligned with our customer team. The viable system model systems and processes ensure that there's a balance between an external and internal focus through adapting and organising. These two systems are kept in sync and aligned to the organisation's identity and purpose by the governing system that sits across both of them. We've used increasing lengths of arrows to represent the increasing time spans of each stratum. And this diagram now will help guide us to build out our real-life organisational structure. Now, as we just mentioned, to guide us, we're going to use the diagram where we combine the different organisational frameworks. We're also going to use Team Topologies' team types and the design principles we outlined in Chapter 2. And then finally, we're going to show how this structure aligns nicely to Beyond Budgeting's 6 leadership principles and their 6 management processes. Okay. We're going to start with our customer aligned team. Here we have our Stratum 1 team members and they're all reporting up into the Stratum 2 team manager. Our members are all aligned, they're customer focused. They are actually self-contained with very little dependencies on any other teams. Now we can see how this works by using the 6 systems in the viable system model. System 1, value creation. There is natural synergy amongst the team because they're all aligned to wanting to deliver a quality outcome. Trust is high because they're all working together. System 2, coordinating. Well, coordination is simple because the people just talk to each other. They don't need to set up meetings across departments. They don't need to worry about escalations up different management lines. They simply work together to get on with the job. Transparency here is very high because everyone can see what is going on. Monitoring. Well, monitoring is based more on progress than activity. Not so much on activities like how many sales calls were made, how many lines of code were written, what's the average call handling time. It's more about measuring the flow of value-adding tasks like engagement, delivery, and customer success. Think of this as our team striving to achieve a new personal best. Monitoring this way also aligns nicely to the Beyond Budgeting's relative KPIs. How we're going relative to the market, how we're going against our competition, how we're going towards increasing customer satisfaction. All of this combines to say, well, how are we growing our bottom line results? Organising. Well, our team is actually self-organising, self-managing. This is because the structure and how the team works kind of builds these guide rails that keeps people focused on the identity and purpose of the organisation. Now, we hear of other organisations wanting to put in place self-managing teams, but they don't remove the functional silos. So somehow these team people are going to reach across all the different silos to get people to work together and manage. It ends up in chaos, and the end result is upper management has to step in. For our organising, we've also used a specialist team, Orange, as per the Team Topologies. Here, our specialist team is removing extraneous work off our stream teams, which becomes intrinsic work for our specialists because it's work that they specialise in. There's more details on that in Chapter 2. Okay, adapting. Again, following Team Topologies, we've added an enabling team, Purple, which facilitates skills development, training across the stream teams and the specialist teams. Our adapting team also acts like the fingertips of our organisation, and they're sensing the first movement of customer preferences of what our competitors are up to out there, and they can feed that back up the line to look at new opportunities and new threats. Governing. As mentioned before, we kind of have these guide rails that keep our team aligned to the organisation's identity and purpose. We also have our Stratum 2 manager, and they act kind of like a closed feedback control loop, and they can course correct if the team is heading on the wrong direction, or they can alter course based on changes in customer preferences or other threats that are coming in. Looking at our Stratum 2 manager, their role is very different from the typical frontline manager you see in a functional silo organisation. They act more like a business owner. They are more likely to be called what we call T-shaped people. That is, they have a broad set of skills and knowledge while still having some expertise from where they've come from. Now, what they're very good at is managing cross-functional teams because they're good at problem solving, they're good at handling innovation, they're good at adaptability, and they do it with empathy. Their approach is eyes on, hands off. This also helps us avoid the issue in Chapter 1 of promotion and the Peter Principle, where we promote the expert, the best salesperson, the best developer. Looking at our structure, there's no way that we're going to be inclined to promote experts. We want to look for these T-shaped people. Now, this doesn't mean our experts do not operate at higher levels. For example, here we have built for our team manager a Stratum 2 specialist team, and they work as a service supporting our manager, our stream teams and our specialist teams. And this could be through progress reporting, financial status, or research into the market and competitors. Okay. To simply scale up our customer aligned team, all we do is duplicate the structure. Now, it may not be exactly the same. We just follow the design principles from chapter 2, but we're building out the same sort of structure. And these teams then report up into our geographical regional manager. Now, if the market is big enough, this recursive layer could be done by country, Germany, France, the UK, or by region inside a country, the Northeast, the Midwest, or by industries, manufacturing, insurance, government. Governing at this level is we take the organisational identity and purpose and we cascade it down to be in relation to the market that it's addressing. We gave examples of this in chapter 2 where we used OKRs to cascade the mission statement down the layers of the organisation. Here, our adapting system is using tools like a SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and threats, which looks out 2 years to what could be changing and what do we need to adapt to going forward. An example of this would be artificial intelligence, where working with the customer aligned team and with product development, they could implement something like an AI-powered chatbot to handle support. Okay, again, scaling is simply duplicating our Stratum 3 groups. Again, it might not be exactly the same, but we will follow those design principles. Our Stratum 3 managers report up to the next recursive layer, our global go-to-market manager. At this level, governing is as per the organisation's overall identity and purpose. Adapting here would use broader tools. They would probably work with the CEO at Stratum 5 and the board at Stratum 6, and they would want to look out 5, 10 and 20 years. To do this, an input can be found from using something like the pestle analysis. This is looking at the political, the economic, the social, the technological, the environmental and the legal landscapes and how they might change. Again, we can use artificial intelligence as an example here. With artificial intelligence, how will industries change? Healthcare, manufacturing, supply chain, insurance, financial services, the government. From our pestle analysis, we may look at, well, how will the economic world change? What will there be? What new business models will there be? What old ones will be destroyed? In the social world, how will people interact, use, consume and seek advice from AI tools? With improved healthcare, what will change with our population's demographics? In the environmental space, what energy consumption will dramatically increase through the use of AI farms, or potentially offset by using AI to create stable fusion energy? In the political world, the geopolitical landscape is going to have multiple earthquakes. What policies and regulations will need to be put in place? And from the legal point of view, what's the ramifications of all these changes? Hint, it's going to be big. Now, with this input, we can use a model such as the generic foresight process by Dr. Joe Voris, and now we're using tools such as scenario planning, systems thinking, causal layered analysis, backcasting. From here, we can now be more informed to make the right strategic decisions so that our organisation remains viable and prosperous. Because as Peter Drucker said, the best way to predict the future is to create it. All right, we now need to build out our rest of our organisation with 2 new groups. The first is the product development team. As we build out our product teams, our diagram is more figurative than literal. This is to show how the groups fit together within the overall organisation. For a deeper understanding of how to build out product teams, the Team Topologies people provide excellent information and guidance. Okay, we start with our shared platform teams. spanning the recursive layers from Stratum 1 up to general management at Stratum 3. Our platform group is made up of 2 self-contained teams that operate with little dependencies. Our specialist and enabling teams might be site reliability engineering, security by design, privacy by design. The shared platform teams work together in an as-a-service mode. This allows them to achieve excellent performance and quality, highlighted in the book Accelerate that we discussed in Chapter 2. Consuming the services of these 2 platforms are the segment requirement platforms. Here we again have self-contained teams that add functionality which is required by the specific market segments. They work with the shared platform teams in an as-a-service mode, using APIs and sending product requests as needed. All of these development teams collaborate with the localization team. This team sends requests to the cloud platform, such as requiring double byte character set to support written languages such as traditional and simplified Chinese, Japanese, Korean, Thai, Hindi, Bengali, Farsi, Arabic, etc. The segment requirement teams collaborate with the go-to-market group. This provides the two-way conduit for customer requirements and trends. Also, the team's monitoring systems progress reports are shared both ways, so that all teams are kept informed and aligned. This builds trust and transparency. Finally, all of our development teams report up to the product management at Stratum 4. The last group of teams are the shared services teams: corporate finance, brand marketing, people, etc. These teams operate at Stratum 4 layer with a time frame of 2 to 5 years. They help guide, but not direct, their corresponding specialist teams in the go-to-market and product management groups. It is important that the shared services teams do not collapse down on top of the other layers. They need to be enablers, using methodologies like we find in Beyond Budgeting to create environments that allow for the necessary autonomy and flexibility of all the other teams. We have now completed our real-life organisational structure. Building our structure in this way realigns our organisation from being internally focused to being externally focused. This allows us to create true teams of people working together to deliver an outcome. It's not about groups of people who just happen to be doing the same function. This changes the way we think about our roles and our tasks. It changes how we communicate and collaborate. It builds trust. Not just trust across the organisation, but also trust up and down the management layers. This realignment unlocks change. If we compare this to where we started, our vertical functional silos does not allow any of this. We're organised to compete, not collaborate. We can show how effective our new organisational structure is by showing how it supports Beyond Budgeting's 6 leadership principles and their 6 management processes. Starting with the leadership principles and purpose. The purpose of an organisation is written with an external focus, but this can easily be overwritten by functional silos that turn it into short-term financial targets. But our recursive structures with self-contained teams, customer-aligned teams, allows us to cascade the purpose down the organisation in a meaningful way. Remember back in Chapter 1 with Disney, where we cascaded it down to Disney World, the happiest place on earth. Next is values. Now, values come out of our purpose. And just like our purpose can be cascaded, we can cascade the values down our organisation, and we use them to guide our decision making. But again, if we have the traditional structure, our values go out the window. We now have infighting, turf wars. And to stop this dysfunctional behaviour, we have to bring in rules and regulations. Our recursive structure, self-contained team, cascades the values, which helps us make the right decisions. Transparency. In the functional silo world, information is power. We hoard it. We hand it out selfishly when it suits us. In our structure, it is transparent to everyone. Information is now seen as valuable. It helps us improve how we are doing things. Autonomy. Autonomy needs purpose, values, and transparency. Again, our structure, we actually build closed feedback loops, because what this importantly does is adds to autonomy but creates accountability. And with accountability, we now have what we call safe autonomy, not laissez-faire, open slather, unsafe autonomy. Organisation. Well, this happens to be one of the main principles of what we're doing to build out our organisation. We are setting up a structure that cultivates a sense of belonging to organise around accountable teams. Customer. Our accountable teams are all aligned to our customers. This avoids conflicts of interest. It enables purpose and value decision making going forward. Okay, we've covered the 6 leadership principles. Now for the 6 management processes. These actually need the leadership principles to be in place, because for us to have the right processes, we need the right leadership. Let's start with targets. Beyond Budgeting's definition of targets reminds us of the quote, "We may not reach the stars, but we use them to guide our way." Targets are used to help guide our way. We shouldn't have targets like a fixed target which constrains it. We just got to get there. It kind of reminds us of that brilliant Nike ad, "There is no finish line." Forecasts. Well, forecasts we use as a guide. They tell us whether we're on target or whether we need to change course. They're not a commitment. If they are a commitment, suddenly we're back to having a fixed target. Suddenly we're now constrained, and suddenly there is a finish line. Resource allocation. Our self-contained team, with their autonomy with accountability, creates ownership. And as Bjarte Bogsnes says, that when we have ownership, this makes us as cost conscious as we are in our personal daily lives. Performance evaluation. When everyone is working together in a holistic way, everyone's performance is clearly visible. We can see who's delivering and who's struggling. The team working together can step in and provide help, support, training as needed. Rewards. Our self-contained teams succeed together or fail together. We agree with Beyond Budgeting that rewards should be around a shared target, a shared focus, which should be relative to the market, relative to beating our competition. Coordination. Our self-contained customer-aligned teams are aligned to the market, to our customers. They're in sync with the business rhythms and events. Trying to hit artificial targets like a quarterly target or an annual target just creates dysfunctional behaviour. our customers quickly learn just to wait till the end of the quarter or end of the year to get the biggest discount. So, we've covered off our 6 leadership principles and our 6 management processes. A critical point here is that we support them in an intrinsic way. Our structure helps guide our organisation to work towards the beyond budgeting approach. The traditional framework feels like, with vertical functional silos, feels like we're swimming against the current. Every time we try to get forward, there's something pushing us back. Is that how you feel in your organisation? But our new organisational structure, we're actually swimming with the current. It is pushing us forward as we want to get better and better and better. Okay, let's go back to where we started with our traditional structure. How do we change direction? Well, as Clayton Christensen of The Innovator's Dilemma and The Innovator's Solution says, we need to set up a separate group. This is what Charles Schwab did with eSchwab. This is what IBM did for the personal computer. This is what HP did with inkjet printers. This is what Qantas did with the low-budget airline Jetstar. And this separate group needs to be separate in every way, ideally reporting to the CEO or to the board. Because as Bjarte Bogsnes says, it is far, however, always more challenging to take out or remove the stupid stuff than it is to implement it in the first place. In our separate group, we won't implement the stupid stuff. All right, that now finishes our first 3 chapters of our bookcast. In chapter 1, we looked at the academic books, the business books, and we looked at what's missing and the need to build out our integral map for organisations. In chapter 2, we looked at the analogy of rowing versus rafting. We used Team Topologies to help build out, what are the design principles when you're looking to restructure your organisation. In chapter 3, we used Dan and Chip Heath's Rider Elephant Path to show how we can actually start helping to change people in their organisations, their thinking, their approach, their emotions. We showed examples of positive deviance that did this. And then we finally built our real-life organisation using Stratum Theory, Viable System Model, Team Topologies, and Beyond Budgeting. Our next chapters are going to use all the lessons that we've learned here and apply them to real-life scenarios. The first ones is, in a global organisation, how do you run a remote region? The second one will be around the whole working from home discussions. How should we think about this and what do we need to have in place to make this successful? We hope you can join us as we roll out these new chapters. But in the meantime, please remember, as someone once said, if we don't change our direction, we'll end up where we're heading. Thank you.